Welcome everyone. Today we have Alex Seropian with us, who is the co-founder and CEO, or who was the co-founder and CEO at Bungie Studio for about 11 and a half years. Alex has made an incredibly huge impact in the video game industry for over 30 years. There's so much Alex has done, it is hard to put it all in a short summary, but here's my attempt. Alex was with Bungie up to about a year and a half or so past the release of Halo Combat Evolved, and since then he started several more very successful game development companies that include Wideload Games, Industrial Toys, and his newest company is at Look North World. He also co-hosts the Fourth Curtain podcast with Aaron Marroquin that interviews the most successful game developers in the industry to talk about how to maximize your chances of being successful in the video game development industry. There are numerous interviews out there with Alex Seropian, but this one is going to primarily focus on getting to understand his contributions to Bungie a bit better. We will also discuss a little bit about Alex's career and are hoping to get a better grasp of Alex's contributions to the game industry as a whole. So thanks for joining us, Alex. Did I get all that right? And is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Well, first, pleasure to be with you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that sounded like a very lovely, generous introduction. I appreciate it.
So we got a little fun icebreaker. Actually, I have a couple icebreakers. But before I grill you with a bunch of questions that you probably won't remember the answer to, I have to ask, on the Fourth Curtain podcast, you told listeners that your car was struck by lightning while you were driving it. Can you tell us a bit about this experience and how your lightning conductor is running these days?
Sure, I will tell you about the lightning incident. It was the scariest thing that I can remember happening to me. Last month back in Chicago, my son and I were planning to go to Portillo's. And if you're from Chicago, you know Portillo's, home of the famous Portillo's hot dog. We're going to go get a couple dogs. And it started raining. And then we started hearing some thunder rumbling. And, we had the dog with us, so we didn't want to leave the dog alone. So I offered to go to the drive-thru. So I go out and I get in the car, and it's an electric car, and it starts getting a little bit more thunder, but you can tell it's far away because, if you ever saw Poltergeist, to count between the lightning flash and the sound. Yeah, so it's not that close, but I swear I thought to myself, I wonder what happens if an electric car gets hit by lightning. But in any case, I'm driving out to Portillo's. It's not that far away, going down to Plains Avenue over in the western suburbs, and it starts pouring rain harder and harder, and not going very fast, maybe 15 miles an hour, because it's raining so hard. And there are other cars around. I'm telling it this way because these are all the questions that I got.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, kablam! Like my field of vision filled with a white flash, the loudest, just a really, really loud cracking sound. It sounded like the earth had been ripped open. And yet the car was hit by lightning. I mean, and thank goodness, I guess those cars are either grounded or shielded. I don't know what, but the radio doesn't work anymore. But otherwise the car seems to be okay. And I actually drove it from Chicago back to LA. So yeah, that's pretty much what happened. It was bonkers.
Yeah.
And I got to the drive-thru and I texted the family group chat. We just got hit by lightning.
That's amazing. That's amazing that you didn't get hurt and your car's still driving. Like, that's pretty incredible. Wow.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping it would have like a full charge for life, but that has not happened.
Well, you almost won the lottery there.
Yes, I consider myself very lucky.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about Bungie. So thanks your time at Bungie. Thanks again for coming on. To give you and anyone unfamiliar with my YouTube channel some background, I make game videos covering the early Bungie titles. Primarily, this exists within in-depth playthroughs of those games that covers everything you could possibly think of, including secrets, strategy, lore, Easter eggs, game development, and much, much more. Most of my subscribers watching this probably already know quite a bit about how Alex started at Bungie and your time there. Those who want to learn more, I recommend watching my videos or reading the Marathon Scrapbook written by Hamish Sinclair. There's a lot of specific questions about your contributions, Alex, to these games. I just want to ask you not to be too humble in your answers because we really are curious to know about your contributions at Bungie. And now, the first and most obvious question of Bungie I have to ask, even though you probably won't be able to give me the answer, is will you finally reveal how you came up with the name Bungie Studios, or will we forever be held in the dark?
Well, yeah, I'm not going to tell the story of the naming. There's been plenty of speculation over where the name comes from, and some of that speculation is incorrect and some is correct.
Ooh,
I'll just say that.
That's more than I've ever heard, so surprising that some speculations. Anyways, Operation Desert Storm was the second game you made after Nope, and is quite a challenging game. I have to ask you, was this game easy for you to beat at the time, and was it a good stepping stone into your game development career?
Yeah, I think like a lot of early Bungie games, the difficulty level was tuned probably a little bit closer to the developer than the player. So sure, it was not difficult to me. But we had a similar experience with certainly with the first Myth game, where we would make levels, and because most of the play testing was done by me or team members and studio, we got so good at these games playing them over and over again. It got hard. It did get challenging for us to tune the difficulty until we started recruiting, players who were not developers to give us feedback on difficulty level.
Yeah, I certainly heard that about Cross's Bridge a lot. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, Operation Desert Storm was a game that it kind of taught me how to code end-to-end sort of level-based progression game on the Mac. So it was a great start for me, not just to have the experience of building my first commercial game from a development standpoint, but also from the publishing standpoint, starting company. And back then you had to manufacture games for retail distribution, which is a non-trivial endeavor. So creating the infrastructure to do all that and learning how to deal with distribution and get a game out into the market and into players' hands was a huge learning experience.
So I think I've read that you met Jason Jones at Phi Delta Theta, the fraternity, but also heard that you met him at the AI class. Are they both correct, or do you kind of meet them simultaneously? Or
I met Jason at like an intro to artificial intelligence class taught by Christian Hammond, the University of Chicago. Christian Hammond, I don't really know what happened to him, but he came from Northwestern. I know he was like a postdoc at Northwestern. Was teaching a class at the University of Chicago. Jason was not in Phi Delta Theta,
okay,
fraternity that I was in.
Okay.
But my intro to Jason was basically, second, third class. Maybe it was first class. I don't know. But the teacher was like telling us what software package we were going to be using for creating something. And he made some comment like, you won't be able to run this on your own computer because you need like 8 megabytes of RAM, which back in 88, 89, 8 megabytes of RAM was ridiculous. And one kid raised their hand and said, "Oh, I got 8 megs of RAM in my machine," and that was Jason.
Of course.
So I was like, "Oh, I got A, like, who the hell is this guy?" And B, I need to go meet this guy. And that was our introduction.
Oh, so you went and met him because he said he had that much memory?
Well, we had a mutual friend too. I had another a friend, Pete Hallenberg, who he had a game company in Chicago called Chewy Entertainment, and I think I think they may still be in business, like 30 years of
Wow.
operating. And Pete was in our class at school. He, I was friends with him, and he was friends with Jason. And he actually was the one who told me that Jason had been writing his own game. And this was after I shipped Desert Storm, right when I was about to ship Desert Storm, I guess, probably senior year. So he gave us like a proper intro.
Yeah, so the next question I was going to ask you about that Minotaur Labyrinth of Crete. So you convinced him, right, to develop and publish, or finish developing and publish the game. So I'm curious, like, how much did it take to finish that, and how much work did you guys put in? How much, just kind of understand that a little better.
When we first started talking and looking at it, it was pretty playable. I think he had made a version of it like when he was in high school. But it needed more art. My wife did one of the characters in that game, the redheaded mage, and we had a couple friends that were doing some art for it as well. And we would go and test, on the computers on campus, which had, they were on Ethernet, which was not super common. I don't remember how long it took, but it was less than a year for sure, some number of months. And, Jason was still taking classes, so it was not exactly full time.
So it was a good amount of work then. It wasn't close to being ready.
Good question.
Maybe.
None of the other stuff that went around it had been created, like the packaging, a manual.
I understand that.
I think we added. I think maybe it ran over a modem, and we added the Apple Talk. At the Ethernet sort of code, and then we added in the stuff where you could play over a local network, and then one of the players could add a modem player, so you could have 3 people on a LAN plus 1 person on a modem kind of thing, which was pretty neat.
Okay, so let's move on. The next game.
All your listeners are shaking their head right now, going, "What's a modem? What's he talking about?"
We still have cable modems, right?
Cable modem, I guess so.
Okay, the next, Pathways in Darkness was your next game. It's your first hit that really put Bungie on the map, and the manual just gives you credit for the creation of the manual. Was there any more work on the game that you want to take credit for, and what do you think of how the game turned out?
I think the game turned out great. I did all the audio, and I did a bunch of production work, and back then we didn't really have roles like producer. It was a pretty small group of folks between myself and Jason did all the code, and we had an artist named Colin
Brent.
His last name was Brent. Colin Brent.
Yeah, Colin Brent. Yeah.
He was another U Chicago student, and he did. Pretty sure he did all the characters.
Did he do the box cover art?
No. So the box cover art was done by a friend of mine, Phil Candela, who's an illustrator, and that's an actual physical painting that he painted.
Okay.
He did the cover for Operation Desert Storm as well.
Okay, I might have known that, but I don't remember. So.
Yeah.
All right.
And that's a real painting. It's an actual painting that was photographed from the box.
Do you have like the full res?
The painting is somewhere. I tried looking for it the last time I was in Chicago, and I couldn't find it. But I know I've seen it somewhere. I might have it somewhere.
If you ever find it, send it my way and to Hamish Sinclair too.
Send it to you.
I'm sure you still keep in contact with Hamish, huh?
I haven't talked to Hamish in a long time. How's he doing?
I think he's doing well. Yeah. I mean, I don't really necessarily talk to him about personal life, but
I've talked to Miguel Chavez every once in a while, like over Instagram.
I've never talked to him
Hamish,
before.
I haven't talked to him.
I've never met Miguel. All right.
Super nice. All those guys are super nice.
I've seen him in the old videos, but I haven't met him. So in the first Marathon game, though, you developed the soundtrack and designed a few levels. What do you think about how the soundtrack turned out, and do you still go back and listen to it?
At the time, I was super pumped about the soundtrack, and I remember, I remember giving Jason a listen to the music, and I don't know if he even knew I was doing music, and his reaction was, "Oh, that's not bad," which is like an amazing compliment from Jason. So that I was pretty happy about that. I haven't listened to it in a long time, and once we started the podcast, the Fourth Quarter podcast, and we opened our Discord, we had a lot of folks who were around in that time, and there are a lot more fans of that music than I realized, and that's super awesome. Love it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's pretty solid. Was there any other contributions you made to Marathon besides the soundtrack and a few game level designs?
Soundtrack and the sound effects, the audio development and production. Yeah. I did some of the naming of things, and I do take credit for creating the arena style network maps with the first arena map, which was in the first Marathon.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that also was a pretty small team, with Greg Kirkpatrick joining the team and doing a lot of the writing along with Jason, and a lot of the level design. And we had a couple new engineers who joined the team, Ryan Martell and Alan. Oh man, I feel so guilty.
I know who you're thinking of. I know who you're thinking of.
Yeah, you have the credits in front of you, I'm sure. And that's when Reginald Dujour and Mark Bernal, Rob McLeese joined around that time.
Let me ask you later. How did Greg Kirkpatrick come on board? Because I think, was he at school with you guys?
Yeah, Greg was also at U Chicago, and he at some point he wanted to head back to the East Coast, and that's when he started his small studio to work on Marathon Infinity.
That's good.
And he's, I think, been out east ever since.
Yeah, I think he's a teacher, or he was. I don't think he's teaching.
Last I spoke to him, he was a professor at a university.
With the Marathon series and Oni, I'm guessing you're still going to answer producing mostly. But what managerial decisions do you think you made that had an impact on the development of those games?
The Marathon games and Oni?
I'm sorry,
or
Myth and Oni.
Yeah. Well, that period of time, like 97, I guess like 95, 96, 97, when we were starting up those projects, was that was like a period of expansion for the company. We had released a few games that did pretty well, and we transitioned from being a very small independent studio to a developer publisher of kind of medium size. We moved from the south side of Chicago to sort of more professional office space in downtown Chicago. Tripled the size of the studio. Launched 2 additional development teams. So we had 2 development teams in Chicago, and we opened our San Jose office. And we were expanding, our publishing operation as well, doing our own tech support and customer service, and publishing, marketing, distribution, expanding those teams also. So that period of time, I spent most of my attention was on that growth at the company, and less of my time was spent on the development of individual games. So, for instance, we hired Marty and Mike to come in and do the audio work because that was work that I no longer had time to do and contribute to the games. So that was sort of where my area of focus was. I will say on Oni, I did do some of the very final development work on that game, living in San Jose, embedded with the team, placing lens flares in all the maps.
Marty was sure to give you credit for that in the Discord. I saw that. That's kind of funny. So
good times.
So with the growth, were you the one doing a lot of the hiring? Is that kind of, or when it came to the growth, what kind of things were you doing? Is that kind of right, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, there was sort of the planning of like, okay, like what do we want to do? Who do we want to be when we grow up? You know, like what we want to make more games? Do we want to be on more platforms? So, you know, moving from just working on the Mac to working on Mac and PC, that was sort of part of the strategic decisions that I was responsible for, and how do we actually go about making that happen. So by the time we got to Myth, you know, we were releasing the same game on multiple platforms. And then how do we go from a studio with one team to a studio that can build multiple games at a time and feed a publishing operation? You know, when you're back then, it's a little easier today, but back when you had physical goods to move around, you were at a huge disadvantage if you just had one game, because the relationship with, you know, the way you get games onto store shelves is you have a relationship with that distribution pipeline. If you just have one game, you don't really have anything to negotiate with, like a new game with that distribution pipeline. So it was pretty important for our survival as an independent entity to have a certain amount of productivity. If we were just making one game every few years, which can work nicely in an electronic distribution environment that we have today, if we just had one game every few years, we'd be at a huge disadvantage in a retail environment. So getting to become a multiple team studio was really important for us strategically, in order to preserve our independence. So yes, I was making decisions like that, doing a lot of hiring, a lot of thinking about like what kinds of games we were going to green light and who we were going to have put in the positions to deliver on them, and then managing that day to day.
Okay, that's helpful. I think that gives us a better idea of what you were doing. Okay, here's a good one. So reflecting back at your time at Bungie, what can you tell us about what it was like working with Jason Jones as the co-founder?
Yeah, Jason was a I would say pretty singular talent, just really impressive engineer, programmer, and super creative as well. He could write, so pretty inspiring. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say.
Was he pretty easy to work with, like on the business side too, or?
Yeah, I mean, we had I think we each looked at each other with a lot of trust, you know. So where we were each individually focusing on pushing the goals of the company forward, you know, we would collaborate, but you know, also let the other run with you know, our respective goals.
So you left Bungie just a couple of years after joining Microsoft, and from what I gathered, it seems like you prefer to work in a smaller network. Was this the prime reason you decided to leave Microsoft and Bungie and move on to new adventures, or were there any other factors that you would like to discuss? Also, did you enjoy your time at Microsoft?
I loved my time at Microsoft. That was a super exciting period of time with the, you know, launching Halo, launching the Xbox, being part of this amazing company. Learned a ton. I mean, I was starting a family. I was pretty young. You know, we had some amazing success, and that was a lot of hard work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the way my life looked before joining Microsoft was 24/7, you know, building a business. Um, you know, when my wife and I got married, she moved to Champaign to go to vet school, and so we were kind of living apart for a few years, for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point in my life, we were ready to to spend more time together and have kids. And coming back to Chicago was kind of part of that um, plan. So I think in most ways, you know, tapping out from the studio was just personal that way.
So the primary reason you think was more family and personal reasons?
Sure. I mean,
Maybe.
your 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 assessment is sort of professional assessment is sort of right. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm an entrepreneur, you know, and you can kind of be entrepreneurial in a big company, but it's kind of hard to actually be an entrepreneur. Um, so that was certainly on my mind as well.
Okay, last question about Bungie. Reflecting back, the games you're able to create at Bungie, they were very special with very deep universe, tons of lore, intriguing story. What can you tell us about this time at Bungie and why you were able to make games like this while you were there? What are the challenges of creating games like these?
Um, well, I can tell you one of the big challenges for creating games that have like you know, I would call those games that have a soul. You know,
Okay.
they're
Yeah.
games that come from the heart. You know, there's a lot of thought that goes into them. There's a vision in your head of like a world that you're building, and the game might just manifest some small part of that vision, but the fact that it fits into an internal logic and has depth and has ways to access that depth for the player, that's super special.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that's hard to that's hard to invest in, especially today. You know, at a big company, the way the games are very expensive and the way they get funded, mostly is if somebody makes a case for, I think the company should spend its money doing this, and that's a sales job. You know, so that's a producer or designer or somebody convincing an organization to spend their money on a particular product. And a game, like the soul of a game, is hard to comp. And when I say comp, I mean like produce comparables for for a finance guy to look
Mm-hmm.
at and go, yeah, let's spend a lot of money on that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, for us, the key ingredients were that we were independent, we were self-publishing, so we didn't answer to anybody. And game over game, we could take the profits from the last game and invest them into the next game. And we weren't necessarily making our decisions based on any sort of financial metric. So some of that you could just attribute to our youth and naivete. We didn't know any better. We just knew what we thought was cool, and we were going to spend our time doing that, and being excited about sharing that with our players, and then talking to our players. Once, you know, that was a big part of what we did, was we would take games like Marathon to trade shows and play the game with people before it was done,
Mm-hmm.
and talk to them about it and laugh and have fun when it was fun, and, you know, really remember when it wasn't fun, so we can go and fix those parts.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that is kind of it's kind of an environment that you you get in smaller companies or companies that are independent or companies that have figured out how to preserve that part of their culture, as they make new games.
That's a really great answer. I like that. Thanks you. Um, okay, now that we talked a little bit about your time at Bungie, I would like to ask about some of the work you did after Bungie and your contributions to the game development industry. The goal here is to understand your contributions a bit better. Please note that I am not familiar with all your work after Bungie. So, anyways, so my first question I would like to ask you was why you founded Wideload Games. the games you made there, how Wideload was acquired by Disney, and anything else you would like to add about your time there.
Sure. I mean, so going to Microsoft was very educational for me, and at that period of time, Microsoft was producing a lot of games for the launch of the Xbox, and I got to be present and witness how the other developers that were making games for the Xbox, how it was going for them, and I noticed some challenges for that whole ecosystem. Microsoft had some challenges of trying to get what they wanted from developers. Developers had challenges of, working on a new platform or working to, a moving set of requirements or whatever. And, some projects didn't survive that. So, when I considered, after coming back to Chicago, what I wanted to do next, one of the things I asked myself was, is there a way to create a game developer that can be independent and not and have solutions built in to the way it's set up, have solutions built in for those kinds of challenges that I was seeing when I was at Microsoft. Like games, like it's got more expensive to make games. You need more people. So what do you do when you finish a game with 50 people? You don't automatically have a new game that's in production ready to go for 50 people. So what do you do with the 40 people that you don't need to start the next one? Those were very real challenges that were showing up at that period of time. So that's what Wideload was. Wideload was a studio that was built to successfully operate independently in that kind of environment. We sort of inadvertently invented the co-dev method of making games, which is kind of the predominant method that developers employ today. Which means you have a team that's going to make a game, and as you scale, you're adding not necessarily 100 full-time employees, but you're adding partners like studios or contractors or visual effects houses and partners like that allow you to scale, but also allow you to ramp back down when you need to. And we were very successful with operating in that model. We made many games over the 6-7 years that we were operating independently. The first game we made was called Stubbs the Zombie, which was on the Halo engine, which was super successful for us. It has, I think, become a little bit of maybe you could call it has a cult following, and then ultimately led to us working directly with Disney on a Nintendo game, on a Wii game for the Wii called Guilty Party, which that might have been one of the more highly rated games that we did at the studio, but that led to the acquisition by Disney. The studio began to make more sort of free-to-play and mobile games, as was the strategy for Disney Interactive when we got there. And eventually I came out to LA and helped the business grow from managing the interactive business when I got here.
So you left Bungie about 2.5 years after they were acquired or joined Microsoft. And with Wideload Games, you left also about 2.5 years after. So I was curious if there's some kind of personality thing you think that's going on there. That's 2.5 years is
personality thing. What do you mean by that?
If you're oh, okay, I want to go on and do my own thing again. I don't know. Not negative. Okay.
No, Disney at that period of time, Disney basically got out of the games business. So that was less me looking for greener pastures or something like that, and more Disney deciding that they were no longer going to invest in a vertically oriented game business.
Okay, well, maybe that wasn't a good question because I didn't know that. Yeah. Okay, so so you were a game.
No, it's a good question. I mean, it is pretty interesting, just who chooses to invest in the game business. It's it continually grows year over year. And you would think a company like Disney, which is focused on creating new intellectual property and being able to bring those properties to audiences everywhere, um, would be very interested in games, and they are. But their strategy, it's always evolves. They're investing huge into Fortnite right now. Um, and at the time when I got to Disney Interactive, they were investing huge into console games. But just like the market changes, strategy changes as well. And that was just a period of time when the strategy was shifting.
You were a game designer in residence at DePaul University and helped students learn how to develop games and create a couple of smash hits that included Octodad. What can you tell me about why you decided to help out students at DePaul and how that experience went?
That was awesome. I mean, I've always tried to find ways to help folks that are coming up and give back. I mean, my podcast is really about that. Is sharing the stories of folks that have come before me and in and around my career. That's a way of giving back to the community. And being in Chicago around the time when DePaul was starting their video game program, I was invited to come and participate, and I initially was advising the formation of the program, and I pitched to them this idea of a class that would bring together students from different disciplines and help them go through a complete game build and ship cycle, with the idea that they would come together, choose a game that they wanted to create a plan, a design, and a plan around it, actually building it, do that, and then they would submit it to the IGF, which is the International Games Festival. And the first year, we did that over the summer, and that group of students built a game called Devil's Tuning Fork, which was a finalist in the IGF award-winning game. Super cool concept. It was basically a game where you navigated the world by echolocation, using audio.
Mm-hmm.
And the second year, that program was led by Patrick Curry, who was creative director at Wideload and good friend of mine. Mm-hmm. And that's the year they did Octodad. So that was just an awesome experience. And when I got to LA, I got involved with the Art Center here, which is a college in Pasadena, teaching programming to art students, which is also pretty. That was pretty fun. Yeah.
Okay, so after Wideload Games, you started another company called Industrial Toys, which seemed to be much more focused on mobile games. I imagine you started this wanting to tap into the up-and-coming mobile game market. What else can you tell us about why you created this company and about your time at Industrial Toys?
Well, yeah, when I was at Disney, as part of managing the interactive business, we did a lot of research in mobile. Mm-hmm. And it became pretty clear. A couple of things were pretty interesting. It was big. There's so many people with cell phones, and this is back in that's the dumbest statement ever said, but this was back in 2012. Mm-hmm. And just the growth of mobile was insane. It was global. So, having come from a lot of work on consoles, particularly Xbox, where the Xboxes were popular in the US and the UK, but once you got to Asia, less so, but cell phones everywhere. And you could build something really interesting independently with a small team. Kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about like where new ideas come from and where fresh games with a soul come from. Mm-hmm. They come from studios that are able to figure out how to build with their passion instead of with their checkbook. So the idea of, when I had left Disney and thinking about what to do next, the idea of trying to build those kinds of games,
Mm-hmm.
for a core gamer or AAA games, but in this new market that was huge and growing and supported this idea of independent development and all that, was super interesting. And that was really the first company that I started that had kind of like a product strategy like that, and was sort of market timing was good. We raised venture capital to get that company started, um, and operated for many many years, ultimately being acquired by Electronic Arts. So it was a little different from um, you know Bungie and Wideload, which were kind of bootstrapped.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of funded just by our own sweat equity kind of thing. Um, so that's what the uh, the strategy was for Industrial Toys.
Gotcha. Thank you. So my understanding is that Industrial Toys was acquired by EA, and eventually EA shut down Industrial Toys. I'm not. You can clear up my a little fuzzy on it. I heard some things on the fourth grading podcast, but I didn't necessarily dig into it a lot. Could you help us understand the situation better, how that acquisition went, and how things shook out at the end?
Yeah, I mean, so we were acquired in 2018, and with the plan that we would build first person shooters for mobile on some of EA's big shooter brands, particularly Battlefield, which is what we were working on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a few years later, EA changed their mind and canceled Apex Mobile and Battlefield Mobile, and so we
Mm-hmm.
parted ways.
Okay. How far along were you? I'm curious on Battlefield. Just because that's a big title.
We were basically at soft launch, which is like maybe 9 months away from being done.
Okay. Um. Okay. So your LinkedIn profile states that you're a board member of Gunslinger Studios and also an advisor at Farbridge. Can you tell us a little bit about each of these studios and your role with them and why you chose to be a part of them?
Yeah, so Gunslinger is a studio that was spun out of Industrial Toys, led by a good friend of mine, Tim Harris, focusing on mobile. And Farbridge is a studio in Austin run by Patrick Curry, who I mentioned a few
Mm-hmm.
minutes ago was creative director at Wideload, another good friend of mine. They just released a Homeworld game for VR. They work on a lot of games that you probably would know the names of, but and so I'm an advisor to that company, which means I try to be as helpful as I can without actually doing any real work.
Gotcha. So you kind of just helping out your past coworkers, friends, in an advisory position,
Yeah,
kind of.
sometimes folks are looking for introductions to people that they want to do business with, or trying to think through a particular situation that maybe I've been in before and can share my experience and be helpful.
All right, thank you. So your newest company that you created is called Look North World, where you are creating games within the Fortnite platform. I'm curious, how does your company generate money within this platform? And could you also explain why you decided to go down this alternative route in game development?
Um, yeah, so I mean, Look North World is a studio that's building games within gaming communities. It's a thing that I didn't think would be possible um, until I was introduced to UEFN, which is Unreal's engine. It's the Unreal Engine, special version of it that's built particularly for Fortnite. So you can make games using Unreal Engine, deploy them right into Fortnite. And I found this super intriguing because this is like on the indiest of indie scale. These games are a lot smaller than I've been used to building. So think teams of just a few people and timelines of months as opposed to years. And it's a place where we can be super creative, try lots of different things. We've shipped over, I think we're about to ship game number 8 in a couple of weeks, and it's like in 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
um, and the communities in which we're making these games for are really, really large. So there's about 300 million people that play Fortnite every month. And that's just a really fascinating new kind of business model. And if you put that in the context of what's been happening in the game industry the last couple of years, a lot of projects struggling, a lot of teams like our team at EA, being shut down and that kind of thing. There's just a lot of pressure on the business end of game making,
Mm-hmm.
to figure out how to operate in this kind of environment that we have today. And building for UGC is, I think, one of the more exciting parts of the industry. Just a lot of energy there, a lot of players there, and just a lot of opportunity to be an independent developer. And I guess maybe this is a thread of this conversation: being independent and being able to build games that have a soul to them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just on a smaller scale here.
Mm-hmm.
And the way we make money is, it depends on the platform. We operate on platforms beyond UEFN. We have a relationship with a company called Overwolf
Mm-hmm.
that allows us to make games inside of, say, Arc. And we made a game inside of Arc where we could charge, it's a premium mod. We charge $10 for that game. So we make money off of sales that way. On UEFN, i.e. Fortnite, we make money based on how much people like the game, how engaged they are. So if they play the game a lot of people play it, a lot of people play it a lot, we make a lot of money.
Is it kind of like a ad revenue kind of structure? Is that what it is?
No, I mean there's no ads. It's basically the way the model works is Epic Games takes 40% of the revenue that comes in Fortnite, and they divide that money, and that's a lot of money. Fortnite makes billions of dollars a year. So that pool, that's called an engagement pool. That's the amount of money that Epic is paying to people that create games in that ecosystem, and they divide that money up based on usage or engagement. So if you make a game, playtime. I mean, there is a formula which is more complicated than just playtime, but if you want a sort of a simple analogy, you can look and see, if when you load Fortnite up, you can look and see how many people are playing each of these little islands, and the games that have the most players, they're making money. They're making a lot of money.
Okay, so I have listened to several of your fourth career podcasts. Could you tell listeners a little bit about this podcast and why they would benefit from tuning in?
Sure. So, the idea from the podcast, I'm a huge fan of the podcast format. So I listen to podcasts when I'm in the car, when I'm walking the dog, when I'm out for a jog. I think it's a great format for entertainment and sharing information. And the idea behind the podcast really came from some of the podcasts that I listen to. I listen to a lot of stuff on NPR. I listen to Smartlist, which is super popular. And it occurred to me that there's a lot of folks in our industry who are really interesting, have had incredible careers, and have been super successful. And not a lot of people know about them or know their story. So, the idea for the podcast was to create a show where we could share those stories firsthand with those folks. Some of them I know, I'm friends with. Some of them I've never met before. But that's what we've been doing. We're in our second season. We've produced about between 60 and 70 episodes at this point. And we've had some of my heroes and just amazing people on the program, like Nolan Bushnell, who founded Atari, or John Romero, who made Doom, or Peter Molyneux, or Mike Wilson. Just you name it. These folks have some incredible stories. Next week we'll have Harvey Smith, who is the lead designer on Deus Ex, and he does not have a degree from college, and in fact, his formative years blew my mind. I had no idea. So that's what the podcast is all about. I mean, I kind of think about it like, if you're a foodie and you like to go to restaurants and you like to know where your food comes from, or you care about, the chef maybe who's making the food. If you're a gamer, our podcast is sort of the same kind of thing. It introduces you to the folks who made the games, how they made the games, what was in their head, what they learned from it, and what their formative years were like that led to it. So it's a way for Aaron, my co-host, and I to kind of give back and share some of the stories of our contemporaries with folks who are into games.
So when making or playing a game, what parts of the game do you find the most interesting? Is it the world building, innovation, gameplay, multiplayer, new ideas, or something else? And is the answer the same for when you play versus or games you make versus the ones you play? And how much does the story in a game interest you?
Well, I love a good story, and story can take the form of dialogue, environment building, the level aesthetics and all that kind of thing. I'm a huge fan of environmental storytelling, so exploration and world building, like actual physical world building. I'm a huge fan of that when I play games. When I make games, I am a huge fan of experimentation and sort of like the blue ocean approach of either mashing two genres together and trying to figure out ways where they play off of each other, or trying to take something that's been maybe you've done before or that you're a fan of and kind of configure it in a new way. Like Myth is a great example of we were huge fans of RTS games. I played so much Command and Conquer, but we did not love all the time you would spend building up your army before the combat and having the combat resolve super fast and sort of all that sunk cost of the army building. So Myth being a tactical game that way sort of created a game that had space for a bunch of storytelling, but a focus on the tactical combat of moving troops around and actually having a battle. So I kind of love trying to do things that are new, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work. Yeah,
I mean, even Pathways into Darkness was new. There's a lot of new things in Marathon. Anyways. So from your career choices, it seems obvious that you're interested in kind of giving back to the game development community. What led you to invest a good portion of your career into the game development community?
I'm just super grateful for having, I guess, kind of fallen into this business. When I was coming out of college in '91, I could have taken a job, being a programmer, and I almost did. And there weren't many, I guess, role models, or there wasn't really a path to getting into this industry. And it may be really hard to get into the industry today, but at least there are schools that you can go to where you can get a degree or you can get education. There are a lot more points of access. Games are much more mainstream now than they used to be. So just getting a sense of what it's about maybe is more possible today. So just I'm grateful for having the opportunities that I had, and if I have a chance to create some of those opportunities for other people, it feels really good. So
when you make a game, what do you think is the greatest indicator that you were successful at making the game? Is it a great game? Is it sales, good reviews, influencing people, making an impact on the future of the games market, or something else? What do you think?
It's a good question. I mean, I gotta say, making games is hard. We've chosen perhaps one of the most challenging creative careers possible. It's a combination of artistry and technology. The technology is always changing and evolving. The business of game making is always evolving. So just Like getting to the finish line and shipping a game is to be celebrated in and of itself. And if you have the opportunity to make a game that matches your own expectations, that's another win. And if you can also make a game that matches or exceeds your customers' expectations, that's another win. So if you can get yourself into a situation where you could do all three of those, that's a huge success. I've had a couple of opportunities to be involved in projects that have done that. And I think it's hard to ask for any more. If you have the opportunity to make a game that sells very well or reviews very well or makes a lot of money, yeah, sure, that's super rewarding. But getting to the finish line and being as proud of that game as your player is, that's the best reward.